Well, hello and welcome to the Manna at the Tap broadcast. I am your host, Gloria, with my co-host, Jennifer. We have crossed the halfway point and we're now into the fourth week of Lent, and it's Tuesday today, March the 12th, 2024. May I say thank you for being with us. And if this is your first time, we invite you to continue to stay with us as we learn to pick up manna each day to feed our soul. The theme of the Lenten retreat this week, presented by Maureen, is My Holy Response. The manna to pick up today is discovering the difference between a holy and an unholy response to God. Now, Moses told the frightened Israelites on the night they were leaving Egypt, they were not to be afraid, they were to stand firm, and they would see the deliverance of the Lord. Their response was to listen and obey and to start walking on the pathway the Lord had made for them in the Red Sea. Miriam, Moses' sister, was ahead and leading them, and she encouraged the people to keep walking towards her till at long last they all reached the other side as the dawn was breaking. The Israelites knew the Egyptian army had been pursuing them, but Miriam told them the Lord promised they would see them no more after that day. So while the people responded in song, dance, and celebration, the Lord was closing up the waters of the Red Sea. The Egyptian army got stuck in the muddy waters, their chariots sank, and they all drowned. Now it was time to move forward, and what laid ahead for the Israelites was the unknown, the wilderness. And the first reality they encountered in our narrative yesterday was the need for water. Life in the desert was harsh under the hot sun, and they spent days looking for water to quench their thirst. Finally, they found water, but when they tasted it, it was bitter. And that's why the place was called Mara. There was an unholy response from the people to Moses. They grumbled to him, wondering what were they supposed to drink. Moses' response was to cry out to the Lord, and the Lord pointed out to Moses a stick of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water turned sweet. The Israelites drank the refreshing water, and the Lord invited them to listen obediently to the rules and procedures He was setting up for them to live in the wilderness wandering. Jennifer, the people had no idea they would be in the wilderness for 40 years. And I think we are just like the Israelites. We think we'll get through a situation quickly, but this is not always the case. That refreshing water from Mara brought them to Elim. Oh, what abundance awaited them there, with 12 springs, one for each of the tribes. There was an oasis of 70 tall palm trees swaying in the wind. What a holy response as the people sang more songs in celebration of the Lord's blessings, and there was room for all to stretch out. Moses had a pattern of how to have a holy response. Whenever he didn't know what to do, he found himself at the place where he could communicate with the Lord, follow the instructions given with a holy response. The lectionary text for today is in the book of Numbers, Numbers chapter 20. We are almost at the end of 40 years of wilderness dwelling. I think this chapter is probably one of the saddest chapters in the Bible. There had been some unholy responses between Moses, his brother Aaron, and their sister Miriam. She received the brunt of the consequences from the Lord. She was stricken with leprosy and did not recover, but died. Moses was very sad when he had to bury his sister Miriam. It had now been 40 years. Moses had been journeying with the people. The people who came out of Egypt had been slowly dying, while a new generation was coming up. And they had learned to gang up on Moses with unholy responses. As usual, Moses found himself at the place of meeting with the Lord. But somehow today, Moses was not on the same page as God. Yes, he was assembled to meet with God, and he was sure he was going to follow the instructions given by God, but he didn't. He was told to speak to the rock that was in front of him, and the people would have what they needed. And what they needed was water, water for themselves and water for their cattle. Let's watch Moses' unholy response. Instead of speaking to the rock, he looked and spoke to the people. And once he opened his mouth, he addressed the people as rebels. And then he couldn't stop the words from rolling like a train out of control going down a steep hill. He struck the rock twice. Water poured out, and the people and cattle drank. But Moses failed after 40 years to obey God. He failed to trust God. He failed to treat God with holy reverence. And he did this all in front of the people. The consequences was that neither Aaron or Moses were able to enter the promised homeland. The people were unholy in their response. Moses and Aaron were unholy, and God's response was simply, God is holy. To obey God is still our best response. Jennifer, like I said earlier, this for me is one of the saddest chapters in the Bible.
There's so much here again today, and I appreciate your ability to take these stories that you've been hearing from a child and put them in a context that helps me to understand them for today. It is especially helpful for me to flip the page of the lectionary and read today's story and know that there are almost 40 years between yesterday's story
Mhm.
and today's story. There's a lot of water under the bridge, as it were, as we cross the desert, and the people are finding water over and over again. And they've been given instructions day by day, and many changes have happened. Some people have died, new people have been born, and there's all this history here for Moses as he comes into this experience today. And if I'm picking up one piece of manna for me today, it is that when God gives me instructions, when God offers me an invitation, it is important for me to attend to where are my eyes. So in this situation, Moses looked at the people, and then the words started to come out of his mouth, and he could not control himself. If I will keep my eyes on God, if I will focus on the rock that I'm supposed to speak to, I may save myself an unholy response. And I would like to save myself unholy responses today. Because, as you mentioned, sometimes we think a thing's just going to last for a tiny little while and we can just, we can just muscle on through it. And it turns out many of the circumstances of our lives continue for much longer than we ever dreamed they would. So I hear for me the Spirit's invitation today to continue to be in the conversations and to be in the conversations long enough to find out whether I'm on the same page with God. And in order to do that, I need the conversation with the community. So that's a good reminder for me today. There's a lot of feelings in this story for me. Yeah.
Yeah, whenever I think of the story, I think of little Miriam as she watched over Moses as a baby, and what a smart woman. And oh, I don't like the way she died.
Yeah.
Leprosy spoke of the sin that went between her and her brothers. And yeah, it's a sad story. Sometimes I cry over this story. Well,
It's a good reminder that a range of emotions are part of what is the conversation with us and God. And
mhm.
it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, just wrap us up there and then we'll see what else.
Well, I thank you all for being here today. And I'm going to wrap up real quick before my dog needs to head out the door because he's going to tell me over and over it's time to go out. Thanks for being with us today. We hope that you will take a moment to subscribe to the channel and that you'll come back tomorrow to hear what the next part of God's manna for us is to feed our souls. Thanks for being here.